there was a big Supreme Court case decision that just dropped, and there's no way of sugarcoating this. They're trying to deal a death blow to organized labor in this country. Unions are already on the ropes. Unions have been declining in power for a very long time, and they're trying to just finish them. That's what they're trying to do. Now, we've seen a little bit of a resurgence, with Starbucks and Amazon and Christian Smalls. There's been an attempt to revitalize labor unions. And the NLRB, to its credit, has done a good job under the Biden administration of being much more pro-labor than any other president in my lifetime. Certainly Donald Trump and his NLRB was horrendous. But even under Barack Obama, it wasn't good. The best it's been in my lifetime. But now they're fighting a two-front battle. And the second front here is the court system. And the Supreme Court, the amount of damage that they're doing, casually, is infuriating. It's time to defang them. It's time to weaken them. We've seen this before in U.S. history. The Supreme Court overreaches. The president says, I don't agree. That is not going to be what we're going with. And then they have no recourse. What's the Supreme Court going to do? Go after the president with their army? Oh, that's right. They don't have an army. Look, I believe in separation of powers, but I also believe at a certain point, the Supreme Court becomes judicial tyranny. And that's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at. So here's what they say in CNN. Supreme Court sides with cement mixing company over striking workers in latest blow to unions. The Supreme Court on Thursday sided with a cement mixing company that seeks to bypass federal labor law and sue a union in state court for the destruction of property caused by striking workers. The court said the dispute could continue in state court for now, a move that could chill workers' decisions to strike for fear that unions would now have to face potentially costly litigation in state court for misconduct during federally protected strikes. The union argued that the case should be handled by an independent federal agency that investigates allegations of wrongdoing and that the union should not have to face costly state litigation. The case had been closely watched by supporters of unions who have witnessed the conservative majority in recent years chip away their power. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, writing for the majority that included two of the court's liberal members, it was 8-1, y'all. The ruling was 8-1. Only Ketanji Brown Jackson was on the correct side of this. Said that the Washington State Supreme Court had been too dismissive of arguments made by the business that it should be able to move forward in state court with a claim of intentional destruction of property. She pointed particularly to the fact striking workers abandoned fully loaded trucks of cement without telling anyone, a move that could have destroyed the trucks had they not been unloaded in time by non-striking workers at the company Glacier Northwest. Barrett said that the union's actions not only resulted in the destruction of all the concrete Glacier had prepared for the day, they also posed a risk of foreseeable, aggravated, and imminent harm to Glacier's trucks because the union took affirmative steps to endanger Glacier's property rather than reasonable precautions to mitigate the risk. The conduct at issue is arguably not protected by the National Labor Relations Act, Barrett wrote. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Brett Kavanaugh joined Barrett's opinion. Noel Francisco, an attorney for the cement company, said he was pleased with the court's ruling. Our client is entitled to just compensation for its property that the union intentionally destroyed. The ruling is a loss for the unions, but the majority maintained a test for future cases that the unions had argued should remain in place. Given the implications of the ruling and the uncertainty it will create for when striking workers can and can't be sued for damage to their employers, as Justice Jackson stressed in her dissent, it may seem odd that Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Kagan joined Justice Barrett's majority opinion, said Steve Vladeck, CNN Supreme Court analyst and professor at the University of Texas School of Law. But compared to completely revisiting the court's 1959 decision, holding that the state law generally doesn't apply in these circumstances, the fact that Justice Barrett's analysis rests on the narrow facts of this case, including the workers' intentional misconduct and lack of effort to mitigate the damage, likely was enough to attract two of the three Democratic appointees and too narrow for some of her fellow conservatives, he said. So let me break this down into layman's language for you guys. Here's what the CNN article is claiming. The argument is, it's just the narrow facts of this case that made it so that they're allowing the fight to continue in state court, costly litigation to continue in state court. That's what they're saying. But the counter argument from pro-union people, and I think this is correct, is this sets a precedent. And the precedent is you could have the company, the bosses, the management, sue the union for any perceived slight that might cost them money. Well, the whole point of a strike is that it's going to cost the bosses money unless you sit down and negotiate in good faith and come up with a contract we could agree to. That's the problem here. That's the issue here. Now, also, they don't bring up a very important fact in this article. That fact is the cement mixing companies, the workers actually left the trucks on to try to make it so they wouldn't damage the trucks. If they wanted to damage the trucks, there was a way they could have done it and could have done it very, very quickly. Turn the trucks off. Let the cement dry. They didn't do that. They left the trucks running. And then it just so happened, it still may have damaged the trucks. Well, whose problem is that? Maybe if you didn't want to run into this problem, maybe you negotiate in good faith, you do a reasonable contract, the workers agree to it, and then you wouldn't have to deal with this. So you're telling striking workers, you need to make a strike as painless as possible for your bosses, for the company. Well, that's a way to defang every single kind of strike now, isn't it? And again, regardless of the specific facts of this case or how they interpreted the specific facts of this case, they might think it's a narrow ruling, but you're definitely going to see all these companies now suing unions and saying, you cost us money this way, you cost us money that way, it's unfair, it was intentional, etc. And so it's sort of a stealth backdoor way to try to bankrupt a lot of these unions and, by extension, workers' power in America. So they're just saying, hey, fall in line, listen to the boss. That's the end of the conversation. This is a devastating blow. It's a devastating blow to unions. They never should have ruled this way. Only Ketanji Brown Jackson got it right. Only her. By the way, what we talk about almost all the time, we talk about the Supreme Court, is this idea of judicial review. Hey, is this thing constitutional or not? What the hell does any of this have to do with the Constitution? What does that have to do with the Constitution? It doesn't. So in other words, the Supreme Court pretends, us? We're not political at all. We just call balls and strikes. We just interpret the Constitution at plain face value. We're not politicians. We don't make laws. We're not judicially activist. Well, that's exactly what this is. This is you guys being judicial activists. This is you guys being supremely political. So I think that's what annoys me the most out of everything about the Supreme Court, is this totally fake, contrived, inauthentic, holier-than-thou attitude. Please, we're part of a culture in the Supreme Court. We wear our robes, we go to Ivy League schools, we're part of the Federalist Society, and we make decisions for the country, very important decisions. No, you're all political hacks who are in the position that you're in to make the U.S. more of a corporatocracy, more of an oligarchy, to give more control to the economic royalists who you rub elbows with at cocktail parties. That's what you're doing. This is a horrendous decision, and it screws workers colossally. And probably in a short amount of time, we'll see the wide-reaching effects of the conclusion of this case. It's infuriating, to say the least. It's time to defang these people. There's a million different reforms I'm open to. Million. You want to pack the court? Sure. Sure. You want to do term limits? Sure. Absolutely. I mean, you name it, I'll probably support it when it comes to the Supreme Court. Because they are acting like a rogue court right now, and there's no denying it. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.